Good morning. It is Sunday Magazine on CBS Radio. I am Melanie Taylor, and this morning I am honored to be joined by Kurt Kondrich. He is a developmental therapist at Tice Early Intervention and chairs the Governor's Advisory Council for Early Intervention here in Pennsylvania. Good morning, Kurt.
Good morning, Melanie. Thank you very much for including me on your show this morning.
You are welcome, and I am excited to begin the journey with you this morning, and we have a good 25 minutes to talk, and we're going to start early on about your first career, because you have, as a man, have had many careers in your life, and we're first going to start about how you were a police officer. Kurt, go ahead.
Sure, absolutely. I have had quite a journey up to this point. So I'm from the Pittsburgh area. I grew up in Plum, actually, and went to IUP, graduated with a criminology degree. And when I graduated from IUP back in 1985, my goal in life, probably since the time I was a little kid, was to be a police officer. So at that time, things were kind of rough economically in our area, so I applied around and was hired by the Atlanta City Police Department and moved down there and began my policing career in 1985 as an Atlanta police officer. Worked there, saw many things, did many things, was engaged in a lot of activity, a lot of crazy things, and then I actually was craving even warmer weather, so I moved down to Florida, was a police officer in Fort Myers, Florida, working down there, and probably would have stayed there, enjoyed the life down there, but then in 2003, in 1993, the city of Pittsburgh began hiring veteran police officers. They had a mass exodus of retirements. Since my whole family still lived up here, I decided to come back and reconnect with my brothers and sisters and my parents and help out. So I applied and in 1993 was hired by the city of Pittsburgh and was a city of Pittsburgh police officer. Walked a beat, did a lot of community policing type things. Was actually a bicycle officer. I taught the DARE program in several city schools 1 day a week. So I was very involved in prevention and working with kids and helping them to get a good foundation and focus on positive things. And like I said, Melanie, I really enjoyed being a cop, being a police officer, and was probably what I was planning on doing the rest of my life. And then things kind of changed for me. Other directions were shifted in my journey. So.
Right. And this morning on Sunday Magazine, I'm Melanie Taylor, honored to be talking this morning to Kurt Kondrich. He is a developmental therapist at Tice Early Intervention and chairs the Governor's Advisory Council for Early Intervention in Pennsylvania. And we're going to get to that. But things did change, like you said. Once again, you were a Pittsburgh police officer, and you did work in Atlanta and Florida, as you said. But you had a child. And let's talk about Chloe and how your life changed.
Absolutely. So in 2003, my wife was expecting our second child. My son Nolan was 4 at the time. He was born in 1996, a great kid. And so she was pregnant with Chloe. And throughout the pregnancy, my wife and I were both 40 at the time. And they kept asking us if we wanted some prenatal testing because we were older. And I was like, we would both question, well, why do we need this testing? They said, well, you were at that time are at high risk for having a child with Down syndrome. And so my wife and I responded, we weren't going to do anything if we found out our child had Down syndrome, but we still were kind of like pressured and just constantly asked if we wanted these prenatal tests, to which we responded no. Chloe was born on May 16th, 2003, and when she came out, my wife had emergency C-section, and it was a pretty fast delivery. So I remember the doctor, he took Chloe aside because she had aspirated, and it was clearing her, and he kept looking at us, and I kept saying, is Chloe okay? And Margie was saying, is she all right? And I said, she was crying, so I assumed she was okay.
Mm-hmm.
And finally the doctor walked over to us, and he just had his mask on. He said, your daughter has characteristics of Down syndrome. And neither one of us really were familiar with Down syndrome or knew the implications of it or anything. And it was a very clinical, kind of sterile, cold way he delivered that message to us that our daughter had characteristics of Down syndrome. I remember saying to him, I said, well, can I hold her? And I remember he kind of hesitated. He goes, oh, you want to hold her? Almost like surprised that I wanted to hold this child, to which he brought her over to me, and I held her, and I just tell you, she was a beautiful little girl. I didn't know anything about Down syndrome, but I knew she was my daughter, and my wife and I both at that time were just committed to doing whatever we had to make sure that Chloe had the best possible start and hope for her life.
Right.
My son.
And I have been honored to meet you and your wife and Nolan, and I even got to meet Chloe, and my daughters got to meet Chloe also, too. Early this morning here on Sunday Magazine, we are talking with Kurt Condrich. In fact, he gives out his personal cell, and that's 412-951-9117. It's Melanie Taylor. And Kurt's title right now, a former police officer, is a developmental therapist at Tice Early Intervention, and he chairs the Governor's Advisory Council for Early Intervention in Pennsylvania. And his beautiful daughter, Chloe, was born. And now let's take it past there, because early intervention services made a ridiculously priceless impact on your life and Chloe's life, correct?
That is correct, Melanie. It is so much so as I'll detail to you later what it did for my whole career path. But so when Chloe was born, we were initially in the hospital. We were getting kind of negative information about Down syndrome. Actually, a nurse had printed out some stuff off the internet, and I would challenge anybody to Google Down syndrome and see what kind of stuff pops up. It was kind of depressing and sad, and it with this stuff. And then we were connected shortly after Chloe's birth to early intervention, and didn't know what early intervention was. As a matter of fact, up to that point, the only intervention I had known about was gang intervention or drug intervention.
Right.
But it was therapists coming into our house and developing this plan. It was called an IFSP, which is an individual family service plan, to help Chloe have that strong foundation so that she could thrive and, as I said, be successful not just in the early years but throughout her life. And when these therapists started coming in and our service coordinator and talking with us, I tell people at that time we went from talking about her disability to focusing on her abilities. And it was, all I can tell you is that was priceless. You know, when a family initially has a child, it's scary just to have a child. Then when you have a child and the child's given a diagnosis, you know, the fear escalates and you start worrying about everything. You start worrying about the future. You start worrying about medical issues, this and that. And these early intervention professionals, when they came to our house, like I said, it was nothing but positive. It was nothing but talking to us about all the things that Chloe could do, would do, it was going to do. And it really, like I said, it made such a tremendous impact, not just on Chloe's life, but on my life, on my wife's life. My son Nolan, who was 5 at the time, really got to see how his sister was just going to be like everybody else. And it's inspired him so much that, you know, he taught Chloe to read when she was 3 years old, and now he wants to go into education and help kids himself. So
that's amazing.
Really,
and Chloe is currently in 7th grade at Fort Couch Middle School in Upper St. Clair in that district, right?
That's correct. Chloe is in 7th grade, Fort Couch Middle School. She reads at grade level. She goes to dances. She's very social. She plays baseball at the Miracle League. She's involved in a dance class actually on every Friday. Does all kind of stuff. She's very engaged in her community. I often kid people she needs her own smartphone so she can keep track of her schedule because she's that busy and that engaged with everything.
We're talking this morning on Sunday Magazine. I am Melanie Taylor at CBS Radio, joined by Kurt Condrich, who is the developmental therapist, one of them at Tice Early Intervention Center, and he chairs the Governor's Advisory Council for Early Intervention in Pennsylvania, and we're going to be talking about his daughter and Chloe's law coming up very soon. But Kurt, let's talk about how you went from police officer and then started a second career path and how you went about doing that and what your title is now.
Okay, absolutely. I would say it was a very big leap of faith. So Chloe was born. We've received these early intervention services, and I'm seeing the amazing impact. And I will share with you, when I was a police officer, especially toward my later years in my career, I was always thinking about what do we need to do early? How can we get to these kids early and give them a foundation so that they don't end up in the criminal justice system, so that they don't so that they see police officers in a positive light, so that they're able to focus on good things. And really, early intervention was a lot like that. It was coming in there during the early stages and getting a family and getting a child focused on good things that are ahead in life. And I was so impressed by the services that Chloe received in those first 3 years of life. And then again, when she went into preschool, that I started attending meetings, started going to different advisory meetings and that, and a woman was there from the University of Pittsburgh, Diana Knoll, and I remember she said to me, she goes, "You ever think about going back to school?" And I said, "No, not at all." And she says, "Well, I really think you should think about it. We could use some men in the field of early intervention." And so she gave me some information about a program at the University of Pittsburgh. It was a master's degree in early intervention. She kept coaxing me, and she would email me and whatever, and she'd send me some stuff in the mail, and I finally kind of, with my wife's support, took a leap of faith and applied for the program, was accepted, and in 2006, went back to school, received my master's in early intervention from hit in 2007, and that's when I began my new career track working in the field of early intervention as a developmental therapist and also as an advocate and a person who makes sure that people respect our kids and also policymakers support the policies and the services that provide this strong foundation for kids.
That's right. We're talking this morning to Kurt Condrich. He's a former police officer here in the city of Pittsburgh. I am Melanie Taylor on Sunday Magazine, but now he is a developmental therapist at Tice Early Intervention, and he does chair the Governor's Advisory Council for Early Intervention here in Pennsylvania. He gives out his own personal cell phone number. That's 412-951-9117. Before we get into your daughter Chloe and Chloe's Law, thanks to Governor Tom Corbett, this was passed in 2014. We want to talk a little bit about what Chloe has accomplished thus far. You can even talk a little bit, Kurt, too, about her being on the cover of the book Brilliant Souls and that chapter in the book being about her, all of the promotional videos, all of her trips, and all of the engagements that she's been involved with. You can touch upon a few if you can for us this morning, Kurt.
I'd love to, Melanie. Thank you. And I often tell people, I say, Chloe's 12 years old, and I'm in my 50s, and I can tell people that she's planted more positive seeds and done more awesome things in the community in 12 years than most people do in a long lifetime. So it's I feel very blessed and very honored that that I have a child like this. But Chloe, she's actually on the cover of a book. It's called Brilliant Souls. It was written by Stephanie Winzig. She's a nurse who's worked with individuals with developmental disabilities, and she read some of the stuff I was doing and wrote this book about kids with Down syndrome and included Chloe's picture on the cover and a whole chapter about the things that she's done throughout her life. And I use this book as an advocacy piece. I give it to legislators and policymakers and have Chloe sign it and read from it just so that they can see all the things that these kids can do. But also, since with the book, Chloe's picture has been featured on the large screen in Times Square 3 times in the National Down Syndrome Society, which is based in New York City. They have a promotional video every year where they receive hundreds of pictures, and they choose a certain amount of them, a small percentage of them that are featured in this video. And so she's actually been on the big screen in Times Square 3 times. She has been in a commercial with the Pirates for the Miracle League, has appeared on 2 TV shows for the TV series Facing Life Head On about some of the stuff she's done with the Pirates and the Miracle League. She's met with 5 different governors from not just from Pennsylvania but from a couple other states. She's been on the floor of the House of Representatives. She's been at the French consulate in New York City and read to Madame Lejeune as a launching of the Lejeune Foundation North America, and as was part of that ceremony. She's been on several magazine covers, several media articles, as featured in a lot of different types of things like that. And she also received this past year in 2015, she was honored by the Pittsburgh Business Times, which you usually would equate with CEOs and movers and shakers. Chloe actually received the Healthcare Heroes Award from Pittsburgh Business Times for her advocacy on behalf of individuals with disabilities. And it was a really neat ceremony downtown, and she was actually at the Duquesne Club last week just to kind of hobnob with the winners of the different categories. Chloe received the Pennsylvania Pro-Life Leadership Award back in 2011, along with the rest of our family for things that she's done. So I would say she's amassed quite a resume for a 12-year-old.
I was going to say, Kurt,
awesome.
Do you realize that your 7th grade daughter has done more and has done more positive with all of her abilities than most adults have, right?
I do, Melanie, and it's amazing because when you think not long ago, probably I was born in 1963, an individual with Down syndrome could have been labeled. Some of the labels back then were mongoloid or retard, and they were deemed uneducable. Oftentimes were sent to institutions. Always said for a life of exclusion, with no inclusion. So it is quite remarkable. It really is. When I sit back and just reflect on what this little girl has done, and she just keeps going. I'm amazed at it. It's a wonderful thing.
It sure is, and you're wonderful. Your whole family's wonderful. We're talking this morning on Sunday Magazine here at CBS Radio with Kurt Condrich. He is a former Pittsburgh police officer, and now he is a developmental therapist, changed careers a bit at the Tice Early Intervention, and he also chairs the Governor's Advisory Council for Early Intervention in Pennsylvania, and it's all about his wonderful family and his amazing daughter, Chloe. Let's talk now, Kurt, a little about what happened in 2014 about how Governor Tom Corbett signed a bill entitled the Down Syndrome Prenatal Education Act, or Chloe's Law. Can you talk a little bit about how that happened and what it is?
Absolutely. So I can actually go back to when Chloe was first born. There was a lot of kind of a negative reception from some of the medical people, not all of them, but some of them, just about her diagnosis and restrictions on things she could do. And then actually when we brought Chloe home, we would take Chloe out sometimes, and my wife would always say, there's the look and then there's the look. And some people would ask some really strange questions you wouldn't normally ask me about their child, and somebody even asked us one time and said, didn't you guys have the test? In other words, why is this child even here? So we could still see that even in, our generation, there were these stereotypes and prejudices towards these kids. And, here we are, in 2014, 2015, and there's still people that don't realize all the stuff these kids are capable of doing. So then when I became involved in my new career in advocacy and started chairing the Governor's Advisory Council, I started learning that families that were receiving these prenatal tests, which were offered to Margie and I back when Margie was pregnant with Chloe, the families that were receiving these tests and then given a positive Down syndrome diagnosis were basically told, and this was coming from people I spoke to all over the state of Pennsylvania. Actually, I've dialogued with people all over the country and even a support group down in New Zealand. Every person I dialogued with was told basically that they needed to terminate this child, these were some of the words that were used that were related to these families. This child was defective. This child was going to be a burden. One family told me they were told that their child would only do 3 simple steps. So I'm hearing this reaction to these Down syndrome tests, and I'm thinking to myself, well, that's not the truth. That's not what's happening. So I said, I have to do something about that. I can remember somebody say, well, what are you going to do about it? You're just an old cop and was working in the field. And I said, well, I'm going to change things. I'm going to make sure that when a mother and a family receives a Down syndrome prenatal diagnosis, they're giving factual, supportive information so that they understand that, yes, it is different, but it's not the end of the world, that it's actually something beautiful, something positive. And, I've never met a family that has a child with Down syndrome that said that they're unhappy or they're miserable or they're mad that they had that child. They've realized that these children are an absolute gift and a blessing to their community. So I set forth with just really a good friend of mine who works at the Lejeune Foundation. His name's Mark Bradford. He has a son with Down syndrome, and a dear friend of ours out in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, Cecilia Lee, and her husband. We just basically a little grassroots operation decided we're going to see if we can get a law here in Pennsylvania to make sure that these women are given, supportive, factual, positive information once they're given this diagnosis. So.
Oh, my. That is absolutely amazing. We're talking this morning to former Pittsburgh police officer Kurt Condrich, who now is a developmental therapist at Tice Early Intervention Center, and he chairs the Governor's Advisory Council for Early Intervention in Pennsylvania. He's talking about his amazing family, and he's even more amazing. And the words for her are just escaping me right now. Awesome daughter, Chloe, who's in 7th grade at Fort Couch Middle School in the Upper St. Clair School District. And Kurt, you talked a little bit about, of course, this Chloe's Law, but what actually happens when you say that you're chairing the Governor's Advisory Council for Early Intervention in Pennsylvania?
Sure. So we meet bi-monthly as the chair of that meeting, of that council, and we talk to families and professionals about what's going on in the field of early intervention. We make sure we disseminate trainings out and workshops out, make sure that we get the facts out of what's going on. We do a lot of stuff with early brain development, making sure that the therapists in the field are delivering the highest quality type of services, are coaching the families to reach their full potential. So it's a council that really keeps solidifying and focusing on the mission of early intervention in Pennsylvania. It's very bipartisan. Just to let you know, I was appointed by Governor Rendell, reappointed by Governor Corbett. Now I was just recently reappointed by Governor Wolf. So it's I would say if there ever was a bipartisan issue, it's serving and protecting our most vulnerable citizens, and that's what early intervention does. And so when I became the chair of that, I used that also to make sure that I went up to I would make frequent trips to our Pennsylvania Capitol and take information up to legislators, elected officials, and making sure that they, number one, knew what early intervention was. Number two, I would show them the results of what early intervention through my daughter and other children across Pennsylvania. And then number three, a big thing was I was making sure that they would support these programs when it came to budget time, when it came to funding. And somebody once said I was kind of like the ghost of early intervention up at the Capitol, making sure that that I haunted these individuals to show them the way that things were, the way that things are, and the way that things could be now that we have early intervention in Pennsylvania. So it was by doing that, I made all these connections with legislators, which going back to the law we had talked about, that's what really aided me in getting Chloe's law passed when we got that passed and signed back in 2014.
Absolutely amazing. Talking this morning to Kurt Condrich, former Pittsburgh police officer. Now he is a developmental therapist at Tice Early Intervention, and he's a chair on the Governor's Advisory Council for Early Intervention in Pennsylvania. He helped facilitate, thanks to his amazing daughter Chloe's law, which was developed in 2014. Now, Kurt, talk a little bit this morning. We have about 4 or 5 minutes left. There are some great publications and some recent publications, like in the Trib, that I've been reading, some articles that were published that you wrote about. And I want to touch upon the Trib article. It was short, sweet, concise, and to the point about the state of our world today and where we are and how the abilities and disabilities and how Chloe has so many abilities and how Chloe, if the world was just more like Chloe's, so to speak, it would be better. Can you talk a little bit about that article?
Absolutely. So, every night, I'm sure all of us, we watch the evening news, we pick up the newspaper, we hear things, and we're living in a lot of fear today, a lot of turmoil. We see people going on shooting sprees that are blowing themselves up, and there's threats of war, and there's violence, and all kind of insanity. And I watched that, and then I watched my daughter. I've watched my daughter grow the last 12 years, and it really hit me recently that, we talk about who are the disabled ones. I'm looking at Chloe. Chloe will never intentionally hurt anybody. She'll never go on a shooting spree. She'll never blow herself up. She'll never be starting rumors about somebody. She'll never try to get you hooked on drugs. She'll never try to, she has no malice or evil inside of her. She really does not. And she's a true friend to anybody. We have neighbors who have a child that just passed away recently and has another child suffering from a very serious illness. Chloe, no matter what that child's going through, will hug that child and hold that child and just see them for the person they are. So I started thinking we're the ones who label these children disabled, but we're really the disabled ones. We as a culture are disabled by the fact of how we treat each other, how we judge each other, how we have prejudice and hate and violence and anger toward each other, that really if the world was populated with individuals with hearts and minds and souls like Chloe, then we wouldn't even need the police. We wouldn't need the military. We would probably have a glimpse of how God really intended us to be when we live down here on this earth and how we are to treat and respond to others. And so that's what I wrote. I wrote an article, a letter to the editor about her, which was accepted and published. And it really is who are the truly disabled. And I've surmised throughout my law enforcement career and what I do now that it's really the people other than the ones that we label disabled. So.
Right. And of course, we talked about all of Chloe's accolades, but you have yourself, Kurt, received several awards for advocacy and leadership in the disability and early intervention field. And you said that you feel so blessed to be that voice for children like Chloe and their families. And because you are a former police officer, you said your mission now is the same as when you were a police officer, simply put, to serve and to protect.
Yes, it is. And like I said, there's a saying, Melanie, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. I said, this is the last place I thought I'd be in my life, and I'm in my 50s doing this, but I'm very honored and humbled and blessed that I can do this and be a strong voice for children and families. And, I don't think there's any greater calling in life for any of us than to be out there and helping to serve and protect and defend the most vulnerable members of our community. I think if we all would do a little bit of that each day, we would see a dramatic shift in the way that we are as human beings and the way that we are as a culture and how we embrace each other. It would really make a world of difference.
You are so right. And amen. And to be an advocate for your children, and especially a child as special as Chloe, who is so positive, like you just said moments ago, who doesn't see the bad, who sees the good in everybody and is just so kind and compassionate. If everyone was like Chloe, can you imagine what this world would be like, Kurt?
That'd be an awesome place. I often say it'd be a glimpse of what the Garden of Eden looked like. I kidded somebody one time. I said, I think Adam and Eve had Down syndrome, then the devil snuck up and stole that extra chromosome. We've been going downhill ever since.
Isn't that? Oh, that's so great to look at it that way. That's wonderful. Well, it's been an honor this morning, Kurt, to talk with you. I am Melanie Taylor. This is Sunday Magazine on CBS Radio. Kurt Condrich is a local man. Of course, Chloe, his amazing daughter, is in 7th grade at Fort Couch Middle School in Upper St. Clair. He was formerly a police officer officer, but now he is a developmental therapist at Tice Early Intervention, and he chairs the Governor's Advisory Council for Early Intervention right here in Pennsylvania. And I'll close it with giving out Kurt's personal cell phone number. Kurt, you've been gracious enough to give us that number. If anybody would like more information on how to get involved or about early intervention, you can call Kurt at 412-951-9117. Kurt, it has been an honor.
Thank you, Melanie. It's been an honor speaking to you, and I want to thank you for sharing this story and sharing our journey.